The Price of Loyalty, Chapter 1. The wedding night. The grand halls of Wick Manor were ablaze with light and laughter. The celebration of the marriage between Miss Eliza Wick, a woman of impeccable grace and substantial fortune, and Captain Manfred, a gallant officer in His Majesty's army, had drawn to a close. Guests, adorned in their finest attire, had danced and dined beneath glittering chandeliers, toasting the union of beauty and bravery. Eliza, resplendent in her ivory gown, her auburn hair cascading in soft waves, had glided through the evening with a radiant smile. The whispers of admiration and envy had followed her every step, the eyes of the elite fixed upon the perfect bride. Yet beneath her serene exterior, a tumult of emotions roiled. As the last of the guests departed, Eliza found herself alone in the vast drawing-room, the echoes of the evening fading into silence. She glanced at the ornate clock on the mantel, its hands inching towards midnight. Her husband, Captain Manfred, had been conspicuously absent for much of the evening. When he was present, his demeanour was courteous yet distant, his eyes reflecting none of the warmth or affection she had hoped for. The door creaked open, and Manfred entered, his uniform pristine, medals gleaming under the soft glow of the chandelier. He regarded Eliza with a cool detachment, his handsome features devoid of any hint of tenderness. "Manfred," Eliza began, her voice trembling slightly, "it's our wedding night. I thought we might—" "Dispense with the formalities?" Manfred interrupted, his tone clipped. He crossed the room with measured steps, stopping a few feet from her. "Let's be clear, Eliza. This marriage is a matter of convenience." Her heart sank. The faint hope she had clung to throughout the evening shattering with his words. "Convenience?" she echoed, barely able to voice the word. "Yes, convenience," he repeated, his eyes hardening. "Your wealth is what I require, and in return, you gain the title of a captain's wife. Beyond that, I have no intention of indulging in romantic illusions." Eliza felt a cold chill spread through her. She had heard rumours of men marrying for money, but she had never imagined that she would be ensnared in such a loveless arrangement. "But I thought—" "What you thought is irrelevant," Manfred cut in, his voice like steel. "I have duties to attend to, both here and on the battlefield. You will maintain this household and uphold our social standing. That is all." He stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming. Eliza's pulse quickened, not with the anticipation of a bride, but with dread. Manfred's gaze was piercing, his demeanour now carrying an edge of menace. "Manfred, please, she began. But her plea was cut short as he grasped her arm, pulling her roughly towards him. "You belong to me now, Eliza," he said, his voice low and menacing, "and I will have what I want." He led her to the bedroom with a force that brooked no resistance. The room, adorned for their wedding night, felt cold and uninviting. Manfred's touch was harsh, devoid of any tenderness or passion. Eliza felt tears sting her eyes, but she steeled herself, refusing to let him see her break. As he took her, his movements were mechanical, driven by a need to assert his dominance rather than any semblance of affection. Eliza lay beneath him, her body trembling, her mind a swirl of fear and sorrow. The pain she felt was more than physical. It was the shattering of every dream she had held for her marriage. When it was over, Manfred pulled away, leaving her feeling used and discarded. He dressed swiftly, his expression unreadable as he looked down at her. "Understand this, Eliza," he said, his voice cold and detached. "I am not here for love. I am here for your money. Do not expect anything more from me." With that, he turned and left the room, the door closing behind him with a resounding thud. Eliza lay there, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face. The life she had envisioned with Manfred had been a mirage, replaced by a stark and lonely reality. Slowly, she moved to the large window overlooking the estate, the moon casting a pale glow over the manicured gardens. She pressed her hand against the cool glass, her tears flowing freely now. The path ahead was uncertain, but she resolved to navigate it with dignity and resolve. For now, however, she allowed herself to weep, the silent tears a testament to her shattered dreams and the harsh awakening that had come with her wedding night. Chapter 2. The Cold Reality. The days following the wedding night were a blur of loneliness and desolation for Eliza. Captain Manfred, true to his word, wasted no time in asserting his authority and making his priorities clear. Shortly after their marriage, he departed for the front lines, leaving Eliza to manage Wick Manor on her own. Manfred had assigned a regiment of soldiers to guard the estate, ostensibly to protect her and the valuable property. But to Eliza, it felt more like a prison detail, the soldiers acting as jailers in her gilded cage. The presence of uniformed men patrolling the grounds and stationed at various points within the manor only served to heighten her sense of isolation. The manor itself was a testament to opulence, with its grandiose architecture, lavish furnishings, and expansive gardens. Yet to Eliza, it felt empty and hollow, a stark contrast to the warmth and love she had once hoped to fill it with. The grandeur that had once captivated her now seemed to mock her solitude. Days turned into weeks, and the monotony of her existence began to weigh heavily on her. Each morning she would rise and dress meticulously, maintaining the facade of a dutiful wife and lady of the house. She would oversee the household staff, ensuring that the manor ran smoothly in Manfred's absence. Yet despite her best efforts, the void within her grew. Eliza would often find herself wandering the halls aimlessly, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty spaces. The portraits of her ancestors, hanging in ornate frames along the corridors, seemed to watch her with reproachful eyes, reminding her of the legacy she was expected to uphold. The burden of expectation only added to her sense of entrapment. In the evenings, she would sit in the grand drawing room, staring at the flickering flames in the fireplace, her thoughts consumed by the harsh reality of her marriage. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional sounds of the soldiers outside. She missed the laughter and companionship that had once filled her life. The stark contrast between her current reality and her dreams left her feeling adrift and alone. One afternoon, Eliza ventured into the garden, seeking solace among the blooming flowers and manicured hedges. The soldiers, ever vigilant, kept their distance, but were always present, a constant reminder of her confinement. She sat on a wrought iron bench, her gaze drifting over the landscape, and sighed deeply. It was during one of these solitary moments that she first noticed Private Thomas Harland. He was a young soldier, perhaps a few years younger than her, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanour. Unlike the other soldiers, who maintained a rigid and professional distance, Thomas seemed genuinely concerned for her well-being. He would often glance her way, offering a polite nod or a brief smile, gestures that, though small, provided her with a glimmer of human connection. One day, as she sat by the fountain, lost in thought, Thomas approached her. He stood a respectful distance away, his cap in hand. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Wick," he greeted her, his voice soft and respectful. Eliza looked up, surprised by the sound of his voice. "Good afternoon, Private Harland," she replied, her own voice tinged with curiosity. "Is there something I can do for you?" "I noticed you seem quite lonely, ma'am," Thomas said, his eyes sincere. "I just wanted to see if you were all right." Eliza was taken aback by his concern. It had been so long since anyone had asked her how she was feeling. "That's very kind of you, Private," she said, her voice softening. "I suppose I am rather lonely. It's been difficult, adjusting to life here." Thomas nodded, his expression understanding. "If you ever need someone to talk to, Mom, I'm here. I know it's not much, but sometimes a friendly ear can make all the difference." His words, though simple, touched Eliza deeply. For the first time since her marriage, she felt a flicker of hope. She nodded, offering him a faint smile. "Thank you, Private Harland. I appreciate that more than you know." As Thomas returned to his post, Eliza felt a warmth spread through her, a small light in the darkness of her isolation. She realized that despite her circumstances, there were still moments of kindness and connection to be found. It was a small comfort, but it was enough to give her the strength to face another day in her gilded cage. Chapter 3. A Glimmer of Hope. The days at Wick Manor continued to stretch into a monotonous blur, each one blending seamlessly into the next. Yet, amidst the gloom, a small ray of light began to pierce Eliza's otherwise dreary existence. That light came in the form of Private Thomas Harland. Thomas was unlike the other soldiers stationed at the manor. While they were professional and aloof, maintaining a strict distance from their employer, Thomas had a warmth and kindness about him that set him apart. He was always respectful, never overstepping the boundaries of his station. But there was a genuine concern in his eyes that Eliza found both comforting and intriguing. It began with stolen glances. Eliza would be walking through the garden, and she would catch Thomas watching her from his post, his eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy. At first she was wary of these looks, unsure of his intentions, but as the days went by, she began to look forward to those brief moments of connection, the silent understanding they seemed to share. Their first real conversation happened on a particularly dreary afternoon. The sky was overcast, a heavy blanket of grey clouds threatening rain. Eliza was sitting on the wrought iron bench by the fountain, lost in thought, when Thomas approached her, cap in hand. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Wick," he said, his voice gentle. Eliza looked up, surprised but pleased to see him. "Good afternoon, Private Harland," she replied, a small smile tugging at her lips. "What brings you here?" "I noticed you looked a bit down, ma'am," Thomas said, his eyes sincere. "I thought perhaps you could use some company, even if only for a few minutes." Eliza was touched by his thoughtfulness. "That's very kind of you, Private Harland," she said. "I suppose I have been feeling a bit lonely." Thomas nodded, his expression understanding. "It's not easy being here all alone. I can see it in your eyes. If you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." From that day on, their interactions became more frequent. Whenever Eliza ventured into the garden or strolled through the estate, Thomas would find a way to be nearby. They would exchange polite greetings and share brief, meaningful conversations that provided Eliza with a much-needed sense of human connection. Eliza had always harboured a fondness for men in uniform. There was something about their disciplined demeanour, their sense of duty and honour, that she found irresistibly appealing. Thomas, with his youthful charm and kind heart, embodied all that she admired. His presence was a breath of fresh air in her otherwise stifling existence. One sunny afternoon, as Eliza admired the roses in the garden, Thomas approached her with a shy smile. "These are beautiful," he remarked, gesturing to the flowers. "Do you tend to them yourself?" Eliza shook her head. "No, we have a gardener for that. But I do enjoy their beauty. They remind me that there is still life and colour in the world, even if it feels distant at times." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "It's important to find those small joys, especially in difficult times. They help us hold on to hope." Eliza looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "How do you do it, Thomas? How do you stay so positive, despite everything?" He shrugged, a soft smile playing on his lips. "I try to focus on the good, no matter how small. And I remind myself that even in the darkest times, there is always a glimmer of light." Their conversations grew longer and more personal. Thomas would share stories from his childhood, tales of his family, and his dreams for the future. In turn, Eliza would open up about her own past, her hopes, and the crushing disappointment of her marriage to Manfred. One evening, as the sun set behind the hills, casting a golden glow over the estate, Eliza and Thomas found themselves sitting by the fountain, their hands nearly touching. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and for the first time in weeks, Eliza felt a sense of peace. "Thank you, Thomas," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "You've been a true friend to me in a time when I needed it most." Thomas smiled, his eyes warm and kind. "It's been my pleasure, Eliza. You deserve to be happy, and if I can help in any small way, I will." As they sat there, the last rays of sunlight bathing them in a soft golden light, Eliza felt a glimmer of hope stirring within her. In Thomas, she had found not only a confidant, but a kindred spirit. Their connection, though fragile and new, gave her the strength to face each day with renewed courage. Little did they know, their bond would soon be tested in ways they could never have imagined. But for now, in the quiet beauty of the garden, they found solace in each other's company and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Chapter 4. A forbidden romance. The quiet moments shared between Eliza and Thomas became the highlights of her days. Each encounter, no matter how brief, brought a spark of joy to her otherwise desolate life. The more time they spent together, the more their connection deepened, evolving from simple companionship into something far more profound and intense. Eliza found herself eagerly anticipating their stolen moments. She would linger in the garden, hoping to catch a glimpse of Thomas or invent reasons to wander near his post. In turn, Thomas would find ways to be close to her, always with a smile and a kind word that made her heart flutter. One evening, as twilight draped the manor in shades of purple and gold, Eliza and Thomas met by the fountain. The air was warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming jasmine. Eliza wore a simple yet elegant dress, her auburn hair cascading in soft waves over her shoulders. Thomas, in his uniform, stood tall and handsome, his eyes reflecting the fading light. "Good evening, Eliza," Thomas greeted her, his voice soft and warm. "Good evening, Thomas," Eliza replied, a smile playing on her lips. "It's such a beautiful night. I thought I might find you here." Thomas stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I couldn't stay away," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every moment I spend with you makes it harder to leave." Eliza's heart skipped a beat. She knew the risks of their growing closeness, the scandal it could cause if discovered, but she couldn't deny her feelings any longer. "Thomas, she began, but he silenced her with a gentle touch. "I know," he said, his eyes filled with understanding. "I feel it too." Their lips met in a tender kiss, a culmination of weeks of unspoken emotions. It was a forbidden act, yet it felt so right, so necessary. In that moment, all the barriers between them melted away, leaving only their love and longing. From that night on, their romance blossomed in the shadows. They found ways to be together, to steal moments of intimacy whenever possible. The manor, with its many rooms and hidden corners, became their sanctuary, a place where they could express their love freely, if only for a little while. During the day, they maintained their outward appearances. Eliza continued her duties as the lady of the house, and Thomas performed his role as a dutiful soldier. But as soon as night fell, they would find each other, their passion igniting in the privacy of her chambers or the secluded corners of the garden. Their love was a delicate dance of secrecy and desire. Each kiss, each touch, was a reminder of the peril they faced. Manfred's return loomed over them like a dark cloud, the threat of discovery ever present. Yet the danger only fueled their passion, making each moment they shared all the more precious. Eliza found herself drawn not only to Thomas's kindness, but to the allure of his uniform. The sight of him, so strong and honourable, stirred feelings within her that she had long suppressed. His presence ignited a fire in her, a longing she had almost forgotten. One evening, as they lay entwined in each other's arms after a stolen kiss in the garden, Eliza could no longer contain her desire. She looked into Thomas's eyes, her breathing quickening. "Thomas, I need you," she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. Thomas's eyes darkened with passion as he gently cupped her face. "Are you sure, Eliza?" he asked, his voice low and husky. "Yes," she replied, her voice firm. "Make me feel alive again." They made their way to her chambers, hearts pounding with excitement and nerves. Once inside, Eliza felt a mix of trepidation and exhilaration. Thomas's touch was gentle yet insistent, his hands exploring her body with a reverence she had never known. He undressed her slowly, his eyes filled with admiration and desire. "You're beautiful," he murmured, his lips brushing against her neck. Eliza shivered at his touch, her body responding to him in ways she had never experienced with Manfred. As they came together, Eliza felt a rush of emotions, joy, passion, and a profound sense of being cherished. Thomas's touch was both tender and passionate, awakening a desire within her that she had long buried. He made her feel like a woman again, desired and adored. Their lovemaking was a revelation for Eliza. Thomas's every touch, every kiss, was a declaration of his affection and longing. He took his time, ensuring her pleasure, making her feel truly seen and valued. For the first time in her life, Eliza experienced the true depths of passion and connection. As they lay together in the afterglow, Eliza felt a sense of peace and fulfillment she had never known. She rested her head on Thomas's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you, Thomas," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You've given me so much more than I ever thought possible." Thomas held her close, his hand gently stroking her hair. "I love you, Eliza," he said softly, "and I'll do everything I can to make you happy." Their forbidden romance, though fraught with risks, had given Eliza the love and attention she desperately craved. In Thomas, she had found not only a lover but a partner, someone who made her feel alive and cherished. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Eliza knew that despite the challenges they would face, their love was worth fighting for. Chapter 5. The consequences of passion. The days and nights of passion between Eliza and Thomas, though filled with joy and fulfillment, were not without their risks. The more they indulged in their secret romance, the more they had to be careful. It was not long before whispers and rumours began to circulate among the soldiers stationed at Wick Manor. At first, it was subtle, a knowing glance here, a hushed conversation there. But as the weeks went by, the whispers grew louder, and the tension within the household became palpable. The other soldiers, bound by duty and respect, said nothing to Eliza directly, but she could sense their eyes following her movements, their silent judgments hanging in the air. One afternoon, as Eliza strolled through the garden, she overheard two soldiers speaking in low voices near the stables. She paused, hidden behind a hedge, straining to hear their conversation. "Have you noticed how often Private Harland is with Mrs. Wick?" one soldier said, his tone tinged with suspicion. "Aye," the other replied. "It's not our place to say, but it's clear something is going on between them. If the captain finds out..." Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. She knew the risks, but hearing the soldiers voice their suspicions made the danger all too real. She hurried back to the manor, her mind racing. She had to speak with Thomas, to warn him that they needed to be even more cautious. That evening, they met in her chambers, the room dimly lit by the soft glow of candlelight. Thomas's face was etched with worry as Eliza recounted what she had overheard. "We need to be more careful," she said, her voice trembling. "If Manfred finds out, I don't know what he'll do." Thomas took her hands in his eyes filled with determination. "We'll be careful, Eliza. I promise. But we can't let fear drive us apart. What we have is real, and it's worth fighting for." Eliza nodded, drawing strength from his resolve. "You're right. We'll find a way to make this work." As the days passed, Eliza and Thomas became more discreet, their stolen moments fewer but no less intense. They communicated through glances and subtle touches, their love a constant, unspoken presence. The other soldiers, though still suspicious, had no concrete evidence to act upon. Meanwhile, Manfred's absence extended, his indifference only fueling Eliza and Thomas's bond. Letters from him were infrequent and terse, focused solely on practical matters related to the estate and his military duties. There was no mention of affection or longing, no indication that he cared about the life he had left behind. One evening, as Eliza sat in the drawing room, a letter from Manfred arrived. She opened it with trembling hands, hoping for some sign of change, but was met with the same cold detachment. "Eliza," the letter began, "I trust you are managing the household effectively. I will be away for an extended period due to pressing military engagements. Ensure everything is in order. Manfred. Eliza crumpled the letter in her hands, tears of frustration and sadness welling in her eyes. She felt a hand on her shoulder and looked up to see Thomas standing there, concern etched on his face. "Another letter from the captain?" he asked softly. Eliza nodded, her voice choked with emotion. "He's gone for even longer. He doesn't care, Thomas. He doesn't care about me or this place." Thomas knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "I care, Eliza, and I'm here for you, always." Their relationship, though fraught with danger, had given Eliza the love and attention she so desperately needed. But the constant threat of discovery loomed over them, a shadow that darkened even their brightest moments. One night, as they lay together in the privacy of her chambers, Thomas voiced his own fears. "Eliza, what if the rumours reach Manfred? What if he comes back and—" Eliza silenced him with a kiss. "We'll face that if it happens. For now, let's just be here, together. We'll find a way to make this work. I believe in us." Thomas held her close, their bodies entwined, and for that moment the world outside ceased to exist. But as they drifted off to sleep, both knew that the consequences of their passion were ever present, waiting to be confronted. The delicate balance of their secret romance was becoming increasingly precarious, and the day of reckoning was drawing nearer. Eliza and Thomas would have to summon all their strength and courage to navigate the storm that lay ahead, their love the only beacon in the approaching darkness. Chapter 6. A test of loyalty. The war raged on, its relentless toll felt across the land. Wick Manor, though secluded, was not immune to the impact. The distant sounds of cannon fire and the constant flow of soldiers coming and going were stark reminders of the conflict that gripped the nation. Amidst this turmoil, Eliza and Thomas clung to their secret romance, their love a fragile but vital source of solace. One grey morning, the tranquillity of Wick Manor was shattered by the sudden arrival of Captain Manfred. His return was unexpected and abrupt, and he brought with him an air of suspicion and authority that permeated the household. Manfred's eyes, once indifferent, now gleamed with a sharp, unsettling intensity. "Eliza," he said, his voice cold as he stepped into the grand foyer. "I'm home." Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. She forced a smile, hoping to mask her anxiety. "Manfred, welcome back. I didn't expect you so soon." "Clearly," he replied, his gaze sweeping over her with a hint of disdain. "It seems I've missed quite a bit." The days that followed were tense and uncomfortable. Manfred's presence cast a dark shadow over Wick Manor. He moved through the house with a scrutinizing eye, his demeanor stern and unforgiving. It was clear he sensed a change in Eliza, and his growing paranoia made him increasingly vigilant about her activities. Eliza and Thomas had to be more cautious than ever. Their stolen moments became rarer, and each one carried the weight of immense risk. They communicated through fleeting glances and subtle gestures, their love now more clandestine than ever. One evening, as Eliza was preparing for bed, Manfred entered their bedroom unannounced. His eyes bore into hers, a mixture of suspicion and anger. "Eliza, something is different about you," he said, his tone accusatory. "You seem distracted. Is there something you wish to tell me?" Eliza's pulse quickened. She met his gaze with as much composure as she could muster. "Manfred, I have been managing the household in your absence, as you instructed. If I seem distracted, it's only because of the immense responsibility." Manfred's eyes narrowed. "Are you sure that's all it is? I find it hard to believe that you have been entirely faithful in my absence." Eliza's breath caught in her throat. "What are you implying?" Manfred stepped closer, his face inches from hers. "I am implying that I believe there is more to your behavior than mere stress, and I intend to find out what it is." That night, Eliza lay awake, fear gnawing at her insides. Manfred's suspicion was growing, and she knew it was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth. She had to warn Thomas, to ensure their secret was protected. The next day, she found a brief moment to speak with Thomas in the garden. His face was etched with concern as she recounted her conversation with Manfred. "We have to be more careful," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Manfred is becoming paranoid. He's watching me closely." Thomas nodded, his jaw set with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe, Eliza, even if it means risking everything." Their love, though a beacon of light in their lives, now felt like a perilous tightrope. They walked it with increasing caution, aware that a single misstep could lead to disaster. As the weeks passed, Manfred's suspicion deepened. He began questioning the servants, scrutinizing their every move, and making unexpected appearances at various parts of the estate. His behavior grew more erratic, his paranoia transforming into a relentless hunt for evidence of Eliza's infidelity. One fateful night, Manfred confronted Thomas directly. It was late, and most of the household was asleep. Manfred found Thomas on patrol, his eyes blazing with accusation. "Private Harland," Manfred said, his voice dripping with hostility. "A word." Thomas stood at attention, his face impassive. "Yes, sir?" "I've noticed your frequent interactions with my wife," Manfred said, stepping closer. "Care to explain yourself?" Thomas met his gaze steadily. "Sir, I assure you, my only concern is Mrs. Wick's safety and well-being. My duties require me to be attentive." Manfred's lip curled in a sneer. "Attentive indeed. I warn you, Harland, any misconduct will be met with severe consequences. Do I make myself clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir," Thomas replied, his voice unwavering. The confrontation left Thomas shaken but resolute. He knew that his love for Eliza was worth any risk, any consequence. They would have to navigate this treacherous path with even greater caution, their loyalty and love their only shields against the storm that was brewing. Eliza and Thomas's relationship was put to the ultimate test. Each day was a struggle to maintain their secret, their love a defiant act of courage against the suffocating suspicion and control exerted by Manfred. As the war outside raged on, so did the battle within the walls of Wick Manor, a battle for love, loyalty, and the right to choose one's own destiny. Chapter 7. The final confrontation. The air at Wick Manor was thick with tension. Manfred's suspicions had reached a fever pitch, and his once cold and calculated demeanour had given way to erratic and aggressive behaviour. Every corner of the manor seemed to echo with the strain of his paranoia, and the household staff moved with nervous caution, their whispers carrying a palpable sense of dread. Eliza and Thomas, though increasingly careful, could feel the tightening noose of Manfred's scrutiny. Their love, once a source of solace, now carried the constant threat of discovery and ruin. Yet they remained resolute, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. One stormy evening, the tension finally snapped. Manfred, driven to the brink by his unrelenting suspicion, called for Eliza and Thomas to meet him in the grand drawing room. The room was dimly lit, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows on the walls. Rain lashed against the windows, a fitting backdrop for the storm brewing inside. Eliza entered the room first, her heart pounding in her chest. She could see the rage simmering in Manfred's eyes, his posture rigid with barely controlled fury. Thomas followed, his expression calm but resolute, ready to face whatever came next. "Eliza, Thomas," Manfred began, his voice low and dangerous. "I think it's time we cleared the air." Eliza met his gaze, refusing to show fear. "What is this about, Manfred?" Manfred's eyes narrowed. "You know exactly what this is about. I've seen the way you look at each other, the secret glances, the hushed conversations. Do you take me for a fool?" Thomas stepped forward, his voice steady. "Sir, I assure you, my intentions have always been to protect Mrs. Wick and the estate." "Spare me your lies, Harland," Manfred roared, his fists clenching. "I know there's more to it than that. You've betrayed my trust, both of you." Eliza's eyes filled with tears, but she stood her ground. "Manfred, "Silence," Manfred interrupted, his face contorted with anger. "You have humiliated me, Eliza. You, my wife, with a common soldier. Do you deny it?" Eliza took a deep breath, her voice steady. "No, Manfred, I do not deny it. I love Thomas. He has given me the love and attention you never did." The room fell into a stunned silence. Manfred's eyes blazed with a mixture of fury and hurt. "You ungrateful—" Thomas stepped between them, his stance protective. "If you're going to blame someone, blame me. It was my doing. I pursued her." Manfred's eyes flicked to Thomas, his rage shifting focus. "You dare confess to this? In my house?" "Yes," Thomas replied, his voice unwavering. "Because I love her, and I will protect her, even from you." Manfred's fury boiled over. He lunged at Thomas, the two men grappling as the storm outside mirrored the chaos within. They struggled fiercely, the clash of their bodies knocking over furniture and shattering glass. "Stop it, both of you!" Eliza cried, her voice breaking with desperation. "This isn't solving anything." With a tremendous effort, Thomas managed to push Manfred away, both men breathing heavily. Manfred glared at Eliza, his voice trembling with rage. "You must choose, Eliza. Him or me. Your duty as my wife or your sordid affair." Eliza's heart ached. She looked at Thomas, his eyes pleading yet understanding, and then at Manfred, his face twisted with betrayal and anger. The choice before her was excruciating, but she knew she could no longer live a lie. "Manfred," she began, her voice soft but firm, "our marriage was never about love. You made that clear from the start. I fulfilled my duty, but now I choose my happiness. I choose Thomas." Manfred staggered back, the weight of her words hitting him like a blow. "You will regret this, Eliza," he hissed, his voice filled with venom. "I will see to it that you both pay for this betrayal." Eliza stood tall, her fear melting away in the face of her newfound resolve. "Do what you must, Manfred. But know this. Love and honor are not bound by duty alone. I choose to follow my heart." Manfred stormed out of the room, his threats lingering in the air. Eliza turned to Thomas, tears streaming down her face. He embraced her, his touch a balm to her shattered nerves. "We'll face whatever comes together," Thomas whispered, his voice filled with unwavering conviction. "I promise you, Eliza." As the storm raged on outside, Eliza and Thomas stood united, their love a beacon of hope amidst the turmoil. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty and danger, but for the first time Eliza felt a sense of peace. She had made her choice, and with Thomas by her side, she was ready to face the consequences. In the days that followed, they prepared for the inevitable fallout. Manfred's return had indeed brought chaos and pain, but it had also forged a bond between Eliza and Thomas that was unbreakable. They would stand together no matter what the future held, their love and loyalty, the ultimate test of their courage and commitment. The final confrontation had tested the limits of their hearts and souls, but it had also revealed their deepest truths. And in the end, it was their unwavering love and honor that would guide them through the storm, towards a brighter and more hopeful tomorrow. Chapter 8. A New Dawn. The morning after the confrontation was eerily calm. The storm had passed, leaving Wick Manor in a state of quiet tension. Eliza and Thomas knew that their love had been exposed and that they would have to face the consequences of their actions. Manfred, true to his word, wasted no time in making life difficult for them. He sent word to his superiors, accusing Thomas of dereliction of duty and inappropriate conduct. The household staff was ordered to treat Eliza with cold indifference, and rumours spread rapidly, tarnishing her reputation. Despite the mounting pressure, Eliza and Thomas remained steadfast in their commitment to each other. They knew their love was worth any hardship they might face. Together, they began to plan their future, one where they could be free from the oppressive shadow of Manfred. A tragic turn. One fateful afternoon, as Eliza and Thomas walked through the gardens, Manfred confronted them with a contingent of soldiers. His face was a mask of grim determination. "Thomas Harland, you are under arrest for conduct unbecoming an officer and a gentleman," he declared. Thomas stood tall, his hand squeezing Eliza's reassuringly. "I will face whatever comes, as long as I have you," he whispered to her. As the soldiers took Thomas away, Eliza's heart shattered. She knew that the trial would be brutal, with Manfred's influence hanging over it like a dark cloud. She watched as Thomas was led away, her love for him burning brightly in her eyes. The trial was swift and unforgiving. Thomas was found guilty and sentenced to be dishonourably discharged and imprisoned. Eliza's pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears, and Manfred's satisfaction was evident. Eliza, refusing to be cowed, decided to take drastic measures. She sold her jewellery and valuable possessions to raise money for Thomas's legal defence and to support him in prison. Her actions shocked the society that had once revered her, but she no longer cared for their judgment. In prison, Thomas found strength in Eliza's unwavering support. Her letters and visits were his lifeline, reminding him of their love and the life they dreamed of together. Despite the harsh conditions, Thomas remained hopeful, determined to survive and reunite with Eliza. A hopeful new beginning. Months passed, and Manfred's campaign against Eliza and Thomas began to take a toll on him. The strain of maintaining his facade of righteousness while battling his own inner demons left him increasingly isolated. His superiors, noticing the personal vendetta behind his actions, began to question his motives. One evening, as Manfred sat alone in his study, the weight of his actions pressed heavily upon him. He realized that his relentless pursuit of vengeance had brought him no satisfaction, only emptiness. The love and loyalty he had once scorned now seemed more valuable than his hollow victories. Driven by a newfound sense of clarity, Manfred made a decision that would change everything. He wrote a letter to the military tribunal, confessing to his personal vendetta against Thomas and asking for clemency on his behalf. He also sent a letter to Eliza, expressing his regret and acknowledging the pain he had caused. When Eliza received Manfred's letter, she was initially skeptical. But as she read his heartfelt apology, she saw the sincerity in his words. Manfred's actions led to a review of Thomas's case, and eventually his sentence was commuted. Thomas was released from prison, his honour partially restored. The day Thomas walked free, was one of the happiest in Eliza's life. They embraced tightly, their love stronger than ever. With Manfred's unexpected support, they began to rebuild their lives. They moved to a small cottage in the countryside, far from the prying eyes of society, where they could live in peace. Manfred, seeking redemption, chose to leave the military and dedicate his life to helping those affected by the war. He spent his days working in hospitals and aiding displaced families, finding a sense of purpose and peace in his newfound path. Eliza and Thomas, though scarred by their trials, found joy in the simple pleasures of life. Their love, tested by fire, became a beacon of hope and resilience. They worked together to create a home filled with love and laughter, cherishing each day they had together. Epilogue. Years later, as Eliza and Thomas sat on the porch of their cottage, watching the sun set over the rolling hills, they reflected on their journey. They had faced immense challenges and made great sacrifices, but their love had endured. Manfred, now a respected figure in the community, visited them occasionally. The three had found a way to coexist peacefully, each having grown and changed through their experiences. Eliza and Thomas's story became a legend in the village, a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. They lived their lives with gratitude, knowing that their love had triumphed over adversity and that they had found their own version of a happy ending. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Eliza took Thomas's hand, her heart full. "We made it," she whispered. Thomas smiled, his eyes filled with love. "Yes, we did. Together." And so, under the same stars that had witnessed their struggles and triumphs, they embraced the new dawn, ready to face whatever the future held, as long as they were side by side,